What's going on, guys? Oof, that was not good. What's going on, guys? We got a Cappy Army video, man. We love Cappy Army's content. He makes some of the best content, most accurate, most broken down, dynamic, influential content in this whole sphere of stuff, right? With conflicts and politics and just wars. So, we're going to watch this. This is specifically about something I mentioned yesterday. It says, is the US military really out of ammo? So this leads me to something I want to say and give a huge shout out to all of you guys. Um, in yesterday's video, we were talking about that congressional hearing where Pete Hegseth was basically addressing Congress, asking for 1.5 trillion or something to help rearm and continue war efforts in the Middle East. And I basically was defending Pete Hegseth at one point of the video yesterday. And a couple of you guys called me out on it in the comments, and I'm very glad that you did, because it made me do a little bit introspection and ask myself, why am I defending this guy? And the truth is, before he was put into his current position, hate me all you want, but I actually liked Pete Hegseth. I also liked Marco Rubio, and I also used to like JD Vance, all before all of them got into their seats within the current administration. Now, not so much, but I think I was defending him because of that. I still had some like underlying loyalty towards him. So, anyways, good looking out, you guys. The bottom line is, you cannot be a supporter of Ukraine and a believer of Pete Hegseth. They don't go together. Those two ideas don't mesh. You either support Ukraine or you believe what Hegseth's doing, and support him. He does not support Ukraine, so you can't do both. So, anyways, that's it. That's all I got. Good looking out on you guys. Thanks for making me read into that a little bit more. Real quick word from our boys right here.
Hello everyone from Different Breed. My name is John from Sweden. This is Patrick from Norway. We've been in Ukraine for 4 years now. We are transitioning into drones, and we're taking drone classes right now, and we need your help. We are launching a fundraiser for controllers, ground station cables, antennas, and goggles. We're very thankful for all you guys' help up until this point. It means a lot to us. And a lot of the work we've been doing down here wouldn't be possible without you guys' help. So we truly appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. And Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!
As you heard them say, John and Patrick been in country for over 4 years. That's pretty much as long as it gets here, man. These are some of, there's not very many left, but some of the original foreign fighters, foreign volunteers who came to country and are still here alive. So these guys are very solid, working on their own drone unit, and gonna be doing the Lord's work with these drones. So if you are willing and able, and you want to see your funds go to something where you will receive tangible results, it'll be a unit like this, because I'm gonna ask John and Patrick, for once they're up and working, for some of their footage that they get with their drones, so I could show you guys and show you, hey, this is where your actual money is going. So if you're willing and able, link to that will be in the description. Okay, so let's jump into this. A little bit of a longer intro, yeah, sorry about it. Okay, let's see, man.
Experts warn the U.S. military is in danger of running out of critical missiles. They claim U.S. forces burned through 50.
Also, I did get a comment that my picture is too big on screen when we're watching video, so I wanted to appeal to that guy.
Percent of their arsenal in just a few weeks of the war in Iran. The American think tank CSIS warned that it'll take between 2 and 5 years to rebuild America's arsenal at this point. Others claim that it'll take a decade. But is that really the case?
All right, I won't play the whole video like that. I didn't know how long I was gonna go with that sketch, but there's one guy who seems to comment on multiple videos, and he's like, "Make yourself smaller, get smaller on the screen." Dog, just go watch a different video.
Public estimates of weapon stockpiles in the past have been wrong. It was widely reported that Russia would run out of missiles within 3 months of the start of the war in Ukraine. This turned out to be incorrect. The media claimed that Iran was nearly out of missiles in 2025, which also turned out to be wrong. I've been lied to and hurt before in the past. How can I trust you now when you tell me that the US military, which spends $1 trillion on defense each year, is running out of ammo? Sir, how many Tomahawks did we just fire? Yes. Roger. Today, I thought it would be interesting to look deeper at this question. Why is it so hard to estimate a country's classified weapons stockpile? Whose job is it to make sure too many missiles aren't fired? And is the US really running out of ammo? The first way to determine what's left in a stockpile is by looking at the Pentagon's own public estimates. The Pentagon themselves reported that they fired off a gigantic load, striking 13,000 Iranian targets in the war. But how much of that was from the critical munitions stockpile? Multiple sources state the US expended 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles, or about 30% of the total stockpile. Over 1,000 of the long-range joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, JASSMs, were then fired from fighter jets, roughly 20% of the inventory. These munitions flew hundreds of miles to blow up heavily defended Iranian ballistic missile launchers deep in the country. Once the skies were safer from that initial standoff strikes, then US forces reportedly switched to dropping thousands of relatively cheap JDAM bombs from F-15 bomb trucks with big dumpers. JDAMs are typically launched from only 15 miles away from their target. The Air Force maintains a gigantic inventory of over 200,000 of these, and they continue to add 30,000 more per year. Okay, so those aren't going anywhere anytime soon. During the course of the Iran war, Iranian forces fired thousands of drones and missiles. In order to defend against that incoming fire, US warships and Navy shot off more than 20% of their critical SM-3 and SM-6 interceptors. This photo, allegedly taken on board the USS Ford aircraft carrier, says that the closest Iranian missile that got to the aircraft carrier was about 15 miles away.
Oof. Who leaked this photo, bro? GQ counter. Longest. What? I don't know what that is. I don't know what a GQ is. Guided. I don't know. Closest drone. 5. Fleets entered. 3. Presidents kidnapped. 1. Supreme leaders killed. 1. Countries bombed. 2. Oil tankers stolen. 5.
Way too close for comfort. Meanwhile, on the ground, US forces shot off their Patriot missile interceptors to defend 7 different countries in the Gulf. 1,400 of these were reportedly depleted, or allegedly about 50% of the rounds. To give you an idea of how intense the initial fighting was, one new report claims that an Iranian F-5 fighter jet bombed Camp Buring in Kuwait. Similar burn rates were reported for the Army's precision strike missiles fired from HIMARS THAAD interceptors, but can civilian experts, open source intelligence, and the media really know these top secret classified numbers, and what is their record of accuracy when it comes to claiming inventories are low? And we're going to get into all that in a minute, but first, today's episode is sponsored by Abacus AI. As a new father, the thing that I use these the most for is questions about my baby, so I'll ask it, how can I be a better father? My daughter just turned 10 months old, and it says be present in small moments, put the phone away when you're with her, even 15 minutes of fully focused play matters more than hours of half attention. So my favorite thing about Abacus is that it has access to all of the large language models in one place at once. From ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude Opus, Grok, and DeepSeek, its Route LLM feature automatically picks the best model for my specific prompt. I usually ask a million questions like, is it normal my baby is as gassy as me? Phew, Gemini says that it is. But it's more than just helping me not screw up as a parent. Abacus AI also has the latest image and video generation tools. It has PPT generation that creates deeply crafted research presentations. It has a powerful general agent that helps you build full apps, websites, mobile apps, and even other AI apps. It's priced affordably at just $10 a month, which is a lot less than paying for your LLM separately. Visit chatllm.abacus.ai or click my link in the description. It's my baby as a parent.
So it's an AI for your AI, right? That's pretty cool. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to that sick ass shirt, dude. District 9. Rad.
An action that will $10 a month, which is AI, or click my link in the description and pin comment below. Back to, is the US military really running out of ammo? Then in a report from Bloomberg, they said that the vast majority of the remaining 80% of America's JASSM extended range air-launched missiles were just allocated to the Middle East, leaving only around 400 remaining for the rest of the whole world, enough to last for 30 days to defend Taiwan. But the real question is whether or not this anonymous source actually has classified access to the full end-to-end operational picture of total ammo inventory for America, or if they're just speculating based on numbers that they are actually familiar with. Knowing a country's total weapons stockpile is some of the world's most closely guarded and valuable information. In fact, Russia, China, and the United States intelligence services have poured millions of dollars over the past few years into trying to figure out each other's stockpiles and production rates. We know this is the case because of recently declassified intelligence documents. Look at this sanitized top secret assessment of China's growing missile stockpile from 1971, closely tracking their progress. I like how the case officer here writing this report kind of acknowledges how unsure they are about the exact numbers, saying, quote, there might be 10 medium range ballistic missiles, maybe not. These assessments are built from multiple different sources, from spies to tracking cargo trucks. However, getting these kind of ammunition numbers as a civilian in the media is a much bigger challenge. Figuring out how many tanks, aircraft, and troops an army has as a civilian is much easier than determining how much ammunition is on the shelf. This is partly because ammunition cannot be seen even with today's satellite images that civilians can purchase. You cannot purchase photos of classified US weapons inventories off Craigslist, and if you do, you might go to prison for it. Ammo is stored in hidden covered warehouses. They're not freeballing it out in open fields like main battle tanks. It's buried deeply in forward locations. It's spread out and distributed to thousands of forward bases and outposts around the world, and then thousands of separate units. Anyone who's worked retail can appreciate how much of a nightmare doing military inventory is. The Pentagon doesn't make this any easier to track for us. They do not publish total inventories for key munitions. Thanks a lot, Pentagon. They rarely publish numbers of expended munitions. The government does not publish information on surge rate production capacity. So we're left with guessing based on information cobbled together from public contracts and anonymous sources. Essentially, TMZ levels of credibility. No, worse than that. TMZ does some of the best open source intelligence reports on people out there. The CIA should hire them. But what about the anonymous sources speaking to the press? A major challenge with estimating weapon stockpiles, even for people familiar with some of the spreadsheets around them, is the compartmentalization of information. The way it works is a program officer in the US military will be cleared to know about peacetime production rates for a certain type of ammo. Then a CENTCOM logistics officer in the Middle East will only know the total allocation of missiles to the theater. Then a logistician will know how many missiles their specific ship or unit actually expended in combat. Unless you're a very
I mean, excuse me, in my opinion, and I'm no, intel professional, but this is all very basic operational security practice, right? It's OPSEC. You don't want the enemy to know how much shit you got, right? Because then they can track it, and then they know when you're running low, if you're ever running low, when you're out. So this is why I've never taken the U.S. is out of missiles whole hysteria as anything as of real concern, because there's no way in hell any of us are going to know when, even if we had one missile left in the entire United States arsenal of missiles, and there was one left, we would never know about it. So
specific type of high-ranking general, you won't know all three of these numbers at the same time. The logistician, who sees a small slice of the picture, can speculate about the rest of the inventory, those numbers, but it'll be incomplete. In reality, there are only about 100 people total across the highest levels of the US government and military that are in a position to know those three numbers at the same time. Total inventory, how much was expended, and how fast it can be replenished. And those people are not the type that are speaking to the press about it. So how does the media get a good estimate on pre-existing stockpiles then? In the US, they start by looking at public weapons contracts like the document here and these defense company announcements here, and here. Gotta love the military-industrial complex for their press releases. See how this announcement from 2004 shows that up to 2,200 Tomahawk missiles would be delivered. Keyword, up to. This is one of the ways that they keep the exact number in the inventory uncertain. Meanwhile, in Russia and China, the authorities do not release these contract numbers publicly, so assessing the numbers there is legit doing it on hard mode. However, the US does hide some details. There are classified budget lines which further hide total weapon stockpiles. The last estimate of the US military's black budget is over $80 billion. That's nearly 10% of the entire defense budget. That's where they stick their UFO and anti-gravity research. But the point is, there are a lot of weapons on the shelf that are produced that we in the public aren't privy to. However, despite this, it's actually the total inventory of ammo which are likely to be the most accurate estimates. Because when it comes to the total number of ammo expended in combat and the total production capacity, those are the two variables to the equation which are the most difficult for the public to determine, and we'll learn why. One of the big problems here is there is a big difference between missiles allocated to a war and total missiles expended. If 1,000 Tomahawk missiles are allocated to CENTCOM for a war, that number is often confused and conflated and simplified by the media to be the total number of actually expended or fired in combat. Alex Muse, former Marine, put it this way: any munition has 5 distinct quantities associated with it: total national inventory, the quantity allocated to a theater, the quantity committed to a specific operation, and the quantity actually expended. So often the media will collapse those into one category of just used munitions. Typically, US military doctrine is to expend roughly 50% of critical munitions that are allocated to a theater and to leave a buffer room. Assuming the high number of missiles fired is accurate, these were accounted for in advance. They were priced in, so to speak. It's like when you go to the casino and you only take the amount of money with you that you're comfortable with losing. War planning is the same thing. You only take the amount of missiles with you to a war that you're comfortable with losing. So whose job is it to make sure the US doesn't fire too many missiles?
Is it that guy? Is it this guy here? It looks like it's this guy's job.
This field manual, JP40 Logistics, outlines how war reserve munition planning actually works. Joint Munitions Office, JMO, plans all phases of ammunition support for forces. JMO typically has a mix of munitions and logistics planners from each service. Of particular importance are Joint Critical Munitions, which are the set of precision-guided munitions with limited inventories absolutely essential to prosecuting required targets, and for which there are no suitable secondary standard munitions alternatives. So the Joint Munitions Office is in charge of making sure the allocated amount of critical munitions do not run too low. They've been doing this since 2002, managing 18 arsenal depots and ammo plants across the world worth $70 billion, everything from bullets to missiles.
An interesting way to estimate the stockpile is we know that Joint Munitions Command revealed that they look after $39 billion worth of missiles, and an anonymous source said that $5.6 billion worth of missiles were fired in the first 2 days of the war, which is about 15%. JMO has 14,000 personnel, and they have a budget of $1 billion just to do this one job, to make sure the US military manages its ammo inventory correctly. But it's the guys in JMO and logistics who make sure they can sustain the fight. Take a look at the United States Patriot PAC-3 missile interceptors fired off in the Iran war. How did experts conclude 1,400 were fired? They didn't have someone standing there counting every time a Patriot fired its missile off, and if they did, can I have that job? It sounds cool. The estimate is actually arrived at by assuming typical burn rates given how many missiles Iran fired. Some estimates place the total inventory of Patriots to be at 13,000 rounds, so that would mean it's closer to 15 or 10% that were fired. The number of how many munitions are expended in a war are reverse engineered, which is a fancy way of saying they guessed.
One capability that we do know for a fact is running low on missiles is the long-range hypersonic Dark Eagle. The US is considering deploying this to the Middle East, to Iran, for the first time in combat ever. It was developed to knock out ballistic missiles on mainland China originally from over 1,800 miles away, and it reaches those targets in just 20 minutes, so the enemy can't escape after firing. It's got a small warhead of about 60 pounds on it that fires out fragments like shrapnel over a grid square area. But its real power is in its kinetic energy. The thing is going at Mach 5. If you even fling a sandbag at that speed, it's like a stick of dynamite. And this probably weighs 1,000 pounds. But there's a challenge. There are only 8 of these missiles in the inventory currently, and they're $15 million a shot. It could, of course, make other launchers in Iran think twice about firing and revealing their position, but is it even worth expending this type of bespoke, nice, fancy ammo? If we assume all the numbers are correct though, and 50% of most critical munitions really were expended, would the US be low on ammunition? It's hard to tell, because the next number that you need to know in the stockpile equation is production capacity. This is the number that the media and experts both have been the least accurate in determining. 6 months after the start of the war in Ukraine, analysts from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, said that the majority of Russian missiles left remaining were only old Soviet anti-aircraft S-300 missiles. They said Russia can't continue that level of effort very long. This assessment made a lot of sense at the time. Many anonymous US officials were also saying to the media that Russia was just a few months away from running out of ammo. They were estimated to have depleted between 50 and 80% of their ballistic missiles after the first few months of the war. This Pentagon official claimed that Russia would be out of ammo by 2023, but these reports turned out to be inaccurate in hindsight and gave an unclear, misleading picture of the war in the beginning. Where was all this information coming from? It came from the top a lot of time. US Defense Secretary at the time, Lloyd Austin, said, quote, "I'm not sure Russia has those kind of munitions to be able to support that going forward," end quote. Britain's Ministry of Defense also publicly said that Russia had likely expended a large portion of its stocks of Iskander short-range ballistic missiles in the opening of the war. And they weren't entirely wrong either. Early on, it looked like sanctions would drastically slow down any future weapons production. But then something unexpected happened that changed the whole equation. A year later, in 2023, experts had reversed course. They wrote that Russia was not going to run out of missiles anytime soon. In 2025, CSIS said that the ability to fire nearly 150 ballistic missiles in a single month shows that despite sanctions and battlefield attrition, Russia's strike infrastructure remains resilient and capable of periodic surges. In 2026,
Yeah, basically saying we have no idea how many of these that they're making every single day, every single month, every single year, and it's way more than we expected.
Russia continues to launch barrages of hundreds of precision missiles. How could these early estimates of ammo and missile stockpiles be so far off? How could Russia, that spends $167 billion a year on defense, only a small fraction of what the US spends on defense, manage to not run low on ammo? There are a lot of really interesting reasons why this is the case, and it gets to the heart of why estimating total ammo is so difficult. Russia devoted an enormous amount of resources to surge production capacity for missiles at the expense of many other industries in their economy. They sacrificed more than experts had anticipated that they would. Russia turned their economy into a wartime footing focused on producing weapons of all kinds. North Korea delivered millions of artillery shells. Iran, China delivered drone and missile components that helped circumvent sanctions. Because of these variables that experts did not account for or couldn't account for, they got it wrong. This is because surge production has the most variables to account for, and the same case is true in America. Raytheon just publicly announced the annual Tomahawk missile production is scaling up to over 1,000 missiles per year, but it's unclear what numbers they will actually reach and when. These estimates do not take into account emergency authorities like the Defense Production Act, which can change the speed of production by an order of magnitude. Russia and Ukraine did their own version of this in the war. In 2025, there were multiple reports that Iran was running out of ballistic missiles after the initial 12-day war with the United States and Israel. This CNN analyst team assessed Iran could have as few as 300 to 1,300 medium-range missiles left in their
300 to 1,300 left. That's a huge discrepancy.
inventory. This turned out to be wrong though. Why? Partly because Iran surged missile production way faster than most experts had expected. We've been hearing about how the US military has been running low on missiles for years now. Ever since Javelin missiles were sent to Ukraine, we've heard reports of shortages. Then when the Navy sent their fleet to the Red Sea to fight against the Houthis, we heard missiles were low again. We've heard that the Interceptor missiles were heavily depleted during the 12-day war. The Pentagon, meanwhile, is asking for $70 billion to ramp up missile production to restock. But the most pressing real danger of munition shortfalls, I think, is not that the US military is close to running out of ammo yet. First, it means that US allies may go without ammo. And that's what we're seeing happen today. Japan will get Tomahawk missiles much later than expected. This could mean delays in deliveries for Ukraine, who may get less or no air defense missile interceptors to defend themselves. The same case could be true in Taiwan. The US takes inventory from its allies way before before they reach warning levels for their own stockpiles. The countries that will hurt from this the most are US allies that depend on these deliveries. This has a major impact on geopolitics. We saw Russia choose not to send air defense and weapons to their allies recently, and this may have been because stockpiles were enough to fight in Ukraine, but not enough left over to arm allies. Russia chose not to send missiles to Venezuela or Iran before the US took military action there. The US military maintains what's called war reserve stocks for allies, Israel, which is billions of dollars worth of missiles and artillery shells positioned in Israel. There are other similar classified war reserve inventories around the world that the US would first pull into and dip into and take from before strategic reserves. The US could increasingly find itself making the same type of difficult decisions that Russia has had to make in places like Syria, Venezuela, and Iran. The other real point of pain is that replacing these stockpiles of missile inventories is extremely expensive to taxpayers. It'll cost millions of dollars to replace these spent systems. Regardless of if the US is running low on ammo or not, it's likely that the war in Iran has cost tens of billions of dollars so far. And that is really what this CSIS publication is saying. It's not saying the US is running low on ammo, it's saying the US may have to make difficult trade-offs in the future if the war continues. One of the problems with overinvesting in stockpiles is risk of it not being needed. Experts warned that the US forces were running low on Javelin missiles when they were sending them to Ukraine at the start of the war. It was a reasonable concern at the time, given the information on the ground. However, these variables changed in the war, because not even a year later, Ukraine had started replacing the use of Javelins with drones. The US military-industrial complex is also moving towards low-cost, high-volume missiles, drones, and interceptors for future wars. Weapon stockpiles that are needed at the start of a war are not always the same ones needed later phases of a war. If estimating weapon stockpiles are difficult and have often proven to be wrong in the past, why is this information leaked to the media to begin with? There are several interesting motivations for why anonymous officials leak and release information that Russian stockpiles were low, for instance. One of the reasons is psychological. To create panic in your adversary, leakers are hoping that some Russian troops will believe the dire reports. These reports have been used as a way to influence the public into accepting higher defense spending. John F. Kennedy during the 1960s argued the US was falling behind the Soviet Union in ICBM production to justify higher spending. In reality, the US actually had more operational ICBM missiles than the USSR at the time. On the other hand, some reports of stockpiles being depleted were released to influence the US public into not supporting sending more weapons to Ukraine. There's always this element of trying to influence the public with assessments of weapon stockpiles. It's long been a part of the information or propaganda war. Early in the war in Ukraine, news of low Russian stockpiles were used to drum up support, and investing in Ukraine's defense was vital because victory was close. We only can assess their accuracy months later. Ultimately, who is responsible for ensuring munitions aren't overused? That's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane. Specifically, he has the job of making sure strategic stockpiles are enough for other contingencies. The amount of offensive weapons that they commit to a fight takes that into account. But one thing has remained true throughout all these assessments of weapon stockpiles over the years. Somehow, time and time again, humanity seems to run out of people to throw at a war long before they run out of weapons. Check out this video here on the US Army's new 30mm rifle with explosive bullets. I got to be the first one to shoot the prototype, or this playlist here. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cap.
So check out Cappy's channel, you guys. Most of you guys probably already do. If you found my channel, you probably know Cappy, right? But if not, please go like, share, subscribe. His stuff, I'll link his channel in the title and in the description as well. So this was interesting to me, and it's different than, you know, our standard Russians getting blown up by drones or, you know, people's heads exploding type content. But this is, in my opinion, just as important, if not more. And even though it's not it doesn't directly have to do with Ukraine and Russia, it indirectly has a very big effect, more or less. So I think for me, one of the most important parts of all of this kind of information is being able to piece together being able to understand. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to word this. Having a good scope of knowledge all around, and then being able to pull from this knowledge to make your educated assessments on certain topics, right? So if we know what's happening in Iran, Israel, Mali, the UAE, the United States, Russia, Ukraine, and then somebody asks about Ukraine, it could kind of come up with an educated hypothesis, right? Depending on what the question is. So this is really cool, man. I really like this stuff. Like I said at the beginning, it's never been a major concern of mine that the U.S. is really running out of any kind of munition, but I do think a valid concern, at the very least, is what happens if China is just sitting back, supplying Iran with what they need, supplying Russia with what they need. We already know that they're doing this. So China is effectively having these proxy wars with Europe and with the United States, right? Kind of. All while they're sitting back, hands off. What if they decided to get kinetic in Taiwan and the United States steps up to help? Will we have the stockpiles needed to defeat China? I still think 90% yes, but who knows? That's all speculation. Like Cappy said, there's no real way to know how much is in these stockpiles with the classified information. So, anyways, love this kind of stuff. Please do me a favor, like, share, subscribe if you are willing and able to help out John and Patrick get their drones up and running and doing the Lord's work out east in eastern Ukraine. Link will be in the description. I love you guys. We'll see you in the next video.